Hello, YouTube. Welcome back. This is time for another episode of Movies from A to Z. And last week I was on letter R and I talked about reefer madness. So this year for letter S, this week for letter S, I'm going to talk about sex madness. No, I'm not. I wouldn't mind having a little sex madness, but that's probably not going to happen. No, for letter S, I'm going to talk about this nice little drama from 1951, Storm Warning. 1951, Warner Brothers. It stars Ginger Rogers, Ronald Reagan, Doris Day, and Steve Cochran in a film that deals with the Ku Klux Klan, in the southern United States. So the deal here is Ginger Rogers plays a woman named Marcia Mitchell, and not Martha Mitchell, Marcia Mitchell. And she is a model. She's someone who goes from town to town modeling clothes for, I guess, a clothing manufacturer. And she's taking a bus through what is supposed to be, I guess, the American South. And she stops off at a small town called Rock Point because her sister, played by Doris Day, is living there, and they haven't seen each other for a couple of years. And the sister has recently got married, and she wants to meet her husband and all this sort of thing. So she stops off in this town and is immediately sort of struck by how weird everything is. Everybody is very unfriendly, and they're all acting very agitated, and no one will speak to her. She can't get a cab. The businesses are all closing. The lights are going off, and so she's stuck walking through this town, trying to get to this local recreation center where she's been told her sister is working. So while she's going past the jailhouse, all of a sudden there's this chaotic noise going on, and a bunch of men in robes and hoods are dragging a man out of the jailhouse, and they're yelling at him, and they're calling him names, and they're beating him almost to death. And she's watching all this, kind of hiding behind a building, and no one can see her. So this man that's being beaten up somehow manages to get away from these guys for a few minutes, for a few seconds, and starts running toward where she is. But he doesn't get far. Somebody fires a shotgun and kills him. And so the men go around to look at this man's body, and some of them have taken their hoods off. So she can see the faces of several of the men very plainly, but they don't see her. So anyway, when all these guys all disappear, she starts running, and she finally gets to the recreation center, confronts her sister, and tells her what she saw. And Doris Day, the sister, her name's Lucy in the film, tells her that it's probably the investigative reporter who had come to town undercover to find out the secrets about the Klan and to expose them. And the Klan found out, and the local police had a phony charge of drunk driving that put the man in jail to please the Klan. And then the Klan decided, I guess their intention was not to murder him, but to scare him, and the murder was sort of an accidental occurrence. Anyway, so Marcia and Lucy go home. Lucy says, "I'll tell my husband Hank, and he'll know what to do." Well, when they meet Hank, or I should say when Marcia meets Hank, played by Steve Cochran, she recognizes him as one of the men that she saw among the Klan. And so that's the gist of the story, and I don't want to spoil it if any of you have not seen this and would be interested in seeing it. I think it's a very good film, and I used to watch this quite often when it would play on television back in the 60s and throughout the 70s, and always liked it. It was it's listed on Wikipedia as being a film noir, and I wouldn't classify it in that way. I think it's just a very strong melodrama, and I think it's well written and well directed, but it sort of edges on being an exploitational film, and it tries to be a message film, but it's not a hard-hitting message, maybe as hard as it could be. And one thing that's interesting about the way it shows the town of Rock Point. Now, for most of us who live in America, the Ku Klux Klan arose as a bunch of white people trying to oppose any progress of black people in America, and that was their main target. They also hated Catholics, and they hated Jews and anybody who was a foreigner, but their main focus in the American South was against African Americans. Now, in this particular film, for one thing, even though it's supposed to be the American South, no one has a Southern accent, and you only see black people in a couple of crowd scenes. They don't have any prominent parts in the film, and the language of the film, when the people who are running the Klan talk about what they're doing, because they eventually start confronting Marcia because they find out that she saw what happened, they're telling them they're not saying anything about blacks. They're just saying that the Klan does good for the local people. They make the streets safe at night. They don't really say what that means, but those of us who live in America know what that means. And so it's just interesting the way it's done, that it only goes so far in trying to give a hard-hitting message. And the criticism at the time sort of reflected that same limitation. And here's something, a quote from Bosley Crowther, who said at the time, among other things, quote, "A smoothly flowing, mechanically melodramatic film, superficially forceful, but lacking any real substance or depth." So I guess that's a fair criticism, even though I think it's a very well-made film, certainly well acted. I mean, I love Ginger Rogers. Ronald Reagan plays a guy named Rainey. He is the local district attorney who is very much against the Klan and would like to find evidence against them. So when he finds out that Marcia has seen this murder and seen men with hoods on and robes, that is, absolute proof that it was the Klan that did this. So he tries to get her to testify, and that's where a lot of the trouble and a lot of the drama comes in, because Marcia doesn't want to hurt her sister, who's just been married to this guy. She loves him very much, and she's also expecting a baby. So it gets very melodramatic. But Ginger Rogers is always good. I love watching her in a film. Good performance by Ronald Reagan. I didn't care that much for Ronald Reagan as a president, but I liked him as an actor. Doris Day, I think this is probably her first straight dramatic role. She does a very good job. And Steve Cochran is always good as the evil guy in the hard-nosed redneck who usually a womanizer and all that sort of thing. He's very good in that particular role. The director, Stuart Heisler, is somebody who started out as an editor during the 1920s and became a director in the 1930s. Some of his notable films were The Glass Key in 1942, Smash Up, The Story of a Woman, starring Susan Hayward in 1947, Tokyo Joe in 1949, and The Star, starring Bette Davis in 1952. And I guess that's pretty much all I want to say. Oh, one thing is kind of interesting. Before Ginger Rogers was offered this role, it was supposed to be done by Lauren Bacall, who was under contract to Warner Brothers, but she turned it down and went on suspension and was given to Ginger Rogers. So anyway, I guess that's all I want to say. I'm trying to catch up on my movies from A to Z, so let me know if anybody has ever seen Storm Warning, 1951, Warner Brothers. A good chance to see Ginger Rogers, not dancing, but giving a very good dramatic performance. Okay, thanks for watching, folks, and comments are welcome.